Let's go to our second session on the program. The organized labor has given the Nigerian government deadline of May 31st to make public a new national minimum wage. On May Day, leadership of the organized labor in Nigeria rejected the salary structure announced by government. The NLC chairman, Joe Ajaero, said the workforce will not take anything less than 615,000 naira as monthly living wage. We'll look at this and also take a look at other national issues and things that are happening in Nigeria. And to talk on this is the 2023 Social Democratic Party presidential candidate, Barrister Adewole Adebayo. He joins us via Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you, German. Good to see you.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, let's begin from the May Day and the salary structure, the 615,000 that the leadership of the organized labor are already pushing for. Looking at the condition of this country, you think the structure announced by government will do? Mr. Adebayo.
Yes, I can hear you, German.
Okay, I said, looking at what is going on in Nigeria today, the state of the nation Nigeria, and the agitation of the organized labor and their leadership, what do you think can fit in?
Well, the conversation is narrow. They are dealing with wages of employed people only. You know that the employed people in Nigeria are less than the unemployed. And those who are employed in the formal sector are less than those who are employed in the informal sector. And in the formal sector, only a minority of them are employed in government. So the concept of minimum wage is not an economic discussion. It's a legal discussion as to, it's more like how to abolish slave labor in Nigeria. That is to say, you set up a minimum, a floor, so that nobody pays below that amount, so that there is no form of slavery in Nigeria or exploitation. But listen to the conversation on both sides, from the government side and from the labor leadership side. They are behaving as if they are discussing how to make workers live well. And how to make workers live well cannot be determined by salary alone. You have to look at the environment, you have to look at the cost of doing business and the cost of living. So when we are trying to intervene in their conversation, we need to help them elevate that conversation so that it doesn't become too unrealistic and ridiculous, in the sense that what is eating the money is inflation. And what is causing inflation is macroeconomic instability and arising from one, inability of the central bank to keep the value of the money, of the currency, which was the promise made by Awolowo when we were changing from the British pound, or Nigerian pound, to the naira, that we will be responsible, we will not overprint the money, and that we will hold steady the value of the currency. Secondly, we have to look at the problem of governing living wages and costs, which government has to deal with by making social investment. Because when workers are asking for their salary, they are asking for salary to pay for certain basic services. And it is the duty of the government to keep an eye on those basic services to see that they do not outstrip or outrun the income of anybody, including workers.
Okay. And, the last time we spoke, we were looking at subsidy removal and the implication on the Nigerian masses. And this time around, you have said what Labour has done is just for those who have jobs. Talking about those who do not have jobs, how do they survive? If Labour is still saying that the structure announced by government was like a scam, that's what they are saying, because government had earlier on said it was a palliative, 25 to 35%. And whatever we face with in this country, has to go with what government will say and what Labour will do. So we can't just put one aside. Because by the time government announces a new minimum wage, because they've given them deadline, between now and 31st of May, if the minimum wage is not announced, whatever government gets, they should take it. That's what Labour is saying. The ordinary masses, like you said, those who don't have jobs, and those who are not in the circle of organized labor, how do they survive this period?
The issue is this. One, the conversation with labor, between labor and government, is a narrow conversation. Because in economics, I don't want to sound too technical, they are discussing the macroeconomics of their own employment. Because the government is a firm. Government is like a company. So they are working for the government. So they talk about, my employer is going to pay me this amount. That's what NLC and TUC are talking about. At the same time, because of the structure of our labor law, whatever they announce as their own bilateral is going to become the law of the land with respect to those who look to government for labor law. So what we are saying is that both of them are guaranteed to fail, in the sense that if labor had its way, labor will still return crying, because whatever amount of money the government gives to them is not going to be able to solve the problems they want to solve. If the government had its way, the government will also still regret, because at the end of the day, their workers will not be able to live well, and they will not have the loyalty and productivity that's required or that are required to drive the economy. That is why we said to all Nigerians for a long time that please go and deal with Chapter 2 of the Constitution. Make sure that you guarantee basic needs, because that is the reason why we have a government. The reason why President Tinubu is president today, instead of sitting in his house in Bodilon in Lagos, is because we need a government, we need a leadership. And a constitution says this is how we're going to choose our president, who is going to be our chief executive. That same constitution says what the president must guarantee for us. And anyone who is not willing to guarantee these things is not supposed to come and take the job. And what you're supposed to guarantee is security of life and property and the welfare of the people. Simple. Every other thing you do is a further amplification of the basic duty. Keep us safe, keep us alive, at the same time, guarantee our safety, our welfare. So when you do those two things, you are already a president. If you don't do those two things, you cannot call yourself a government, you need to go and do it. And the guidance as to how to do these things are contained in Chapter 2 of the Constitution.
Okay.
How we should write our budget, what our priorities should be, how to involve our people in productivity. But you cannot involve people in productivity if, one, you are spending all the money of the country, sharing it between the tiers of government and operators of government institutions. Because in the macroeconomic analysis of Nigeria, the Labour, TUC and NLC, they are part of government. They are the government themselves, because they are the one operating and operationalizing the government. So when you say that the government has arrested somebody, it is a member of the NLC or one of the government workers that's going to execute it. If you say fuel scarcity has occurred, it's a member of Pengasan or the sister union that is involved in it. So everything they are discussing now is an intra-government discussion. They are forgetting that the rest of us in the economy, 90-something% of us, are not involved in this. And that even within the government, I know for sure that Labour does not expect the government to give them 615,000. That one is certain. To them, it's part of the theatrics of negotiation. So you are trying to share a cow between you and the government. And you say that this one cow, you want them to give you 16 legs of the cow. The cow has only 4 legs. And you're asking for 16 legs and 7 heads. The cow has only 1 head and 4 legs. So right from the beginning, you are asking for the impossible.
But have you seen their, sorry, Barrister, have you seen their breakdown Because they arrived at that 615 after looking at the condition, the present situation of the country. If you have to use electricity, the high rate of electricity, which they pegged at 20,000 naira per month. For those who are on band B, 20,000 cannot even take you for 2 weeks, because I've been there. And if you have to buy fuel, if you drive, you know that workers, according to what the NLC president said, workers don't live in the city centers. They come from afar. So they spend more traveling. So they arrived at 615 after going round and taking a look at what will give them living wage, not even to save. They don't have savings from 615. The reality on ground.
The problem with their calculation is that it's not high enough.
It's not high enough.
Yes, if they do their calculation well and use econometrics and time scale it, they are supposed to be asking for 3 million every month. Which means that if the government gives them 3 million, after 3 years, they're supposed to ask for 6 million. And if the government gives them 6 million, after 3 years, they should ask for 11 million. It doesn't make any sense. Shagari's annual salary was 30,000 naira a year. And that of the equipment was 24,000 as vice president.
But can you compare then the standard of living then and the standard of living today?
The 30,000 of Shagari, the speaker, Mr. Cha, the last
Pastor Adebayo, I think we are having a bit of
10-15 FT salary.
Okay.
So it was having a hefty salary of 15,000. And if you ask your parents, for those who are lucky to have parents, that the day your mother and father got married, what was the salary of your father? You will see that your father was probably earning 400 naira a month, and they were still able to live well. It's not the number that makes you live well. It's what the number can command. So NSC's approach and TUC approach, they are running away from their primary duty, which is to let the government understand that the government is unconstitutional in the way the economy is being managed. And what they need to do is not to be calculating money for themselves only. It is to say that government needs to bring the cost of living down, and government needs to bring the cost of doing business down, which means we need to make social investment. We need to make sure that if you are working in Abuja and your mother is living in Calabar, that with less than 1% of your salary, you can go home with your entire family for the weekend and see your parents in Calabar and come back. And if you have 4 or 5 children with about
Pastor Adebayo. Yes, government needs to bring
salary to pay for their medical.
Pastor Adebayo, yeah, you're talking. Yes, sorry, I need to just come in here. Government needs to bring the standard of living down. Government needs
the cost of living.
Okay, the cost of
where they bring the standard down already.
Okay, the cost of living. Government needs to bring it down. But have you considered the side of government and what government is struggling to achieve? You know that before now, when you were contesting, you made a statement that the way the economy is towards the end of Buhari administration, whoever becomes president, I recall that I interviewed you when you spoke, that whoever becomes president needs to buckle up. Recall you
yes,
made
I
that.
said so.
So if the government is not finding it easy, bringing the cost of living down because of the situation in the country. So what would they do?
Instead of buckling up, the government has actually buckled down. Because when we predicted what was going to happen, we said that whoever was coming in will have to make radical changes.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you without missing words is that this same administration to continue. The only thing you can give them credit for is that they are more efficient than Buhari. It is that in terms of spending, they spend for value for money, they are doing better than Buhari, but they are traveling the same trajectory. They are not making sufficient social investment. They are spending a lot of money, and they are congratulating themselves that they are making a lot of money. Where is their money coming from? There's no higher productivity. What their money is coming from is the monetization of foreign exchange, because by devaluing the naira, if you receive $1 billion, what will give Buhari 400 billion will give them 1.4 trillion. So everybody says, oh, we are making more money. But in reality, what your 1.4 trillion will buy is what 400 something billion will buy under Buhari. So they have not increased the productivity. And there are 3 ways they can improve the productivity. One, they need to have allocated. They need to be. Yeah. They need to be able to cut down the cost of governance.
Okay.
And they need to be able to rein in prices. And many of the drivers of inflation or even stagflation of recent is because of the policy they've adopted. President Tinubu has the alternative to follow what people like us have said in our manifesto, where we're running against them for the presidency. They need to come to our playbook, take a few of it, which is, for example, if workers complain about transportation, the government has enough to invest in transportation to see that, okay, if you are, for example, why are you giving workers 35,000? I assume that they were giving them 35,000 or 35% as a 6-month plan, and that by now they will have buses and other public transportation. So that if you work for the government, if you are a member of NLC, just get your ID card from NLC and TUC and say, I work for the government. You will be able to take public transport to work, and that will be taken away. That will be
all right. All right, you see, the network services are not even friendly. That's another challenge, because we are in a technology-driven world today. We are even finding it difficult to have a better, strong network to carry out our businesses.
I feel the effect of it. There's some delay in the communication.
Okay.
But what it basically is that government needs to do cost displacement, not to try to argue about how to fund it. You cannot tell a person who comes to work and spends 80,000 a week or a month to come to work, that person should have a minimum wage of 70,000. It doesn't make sense, because the person is running at a loss. And that person is still talking about housing, education of the children, even self-improvement, education of themselves, self-improvement. Then healthcare. Then they need some savings. So what the government is doing is to run away from their responsibility. My grouse with Labour is that they allow the government to box them into a technical corner, technical knockout, where they sound more unreasonable than the government. However unreasonable the government sounds, Labour even sounds more outlandish and more unreasonable, because you cannot ask for 615,000 minimum wage, which will give you 615 billion every month and 8 trillion a year to pay minimum wages alone. Don't talk of the average wage, the wages, or the consolidated payment for higher level employees. And then that will service only about 10% of the working population. What happens to the rest of the population? It means that when you work for the government, then you are the one who buy all the food. You are the one who would buy all the services, because no other person can compete with you. It doesn't make any sense. Remember that the structured payment is meant to meet certain cost of living. So why don't you tackle the cost of living in such a way that with minimum wages, you can have assurances of basic living that is decent? And government has been disinvesting. Obasanjo started it by what they call monetization, where you will not be entitled to housing anymore. So those who were at the government at that time, they were able to buy their houses.
All right. All right,
having housing.
Pastor Adebayo, you see, this discussion is not what we will just end today. We need to have another day to take a look at this, because Nigerians are interested They want to know how they can put a stop to the cost of living in the country today, which is very high. We know that it's a global challenge. Globally, the cost of living is high too. So let's just at this junction say thank you. We'll have more time to talk again when we have you on the program next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and God bless Nigeria.
Thank you.
But the solution clearly is to ensure that we have a government that does social investment, and all of us should look for that kind of government, not quarreling over money or wages, which will not last. They will come back again within a year or two, repeat the same argument to no end.
Thank you so much.